The second lesson in genetics covers incomplete dominance and multiple alleles. So let's first do incomplete dominance. As it suggests, the name suggests that there's not one trait that's dominant. So, for example, in snapdragons, we write the key this way. Just look up to here. In snapdragons, we will just symbolize C1 as red and C2 as white. So that's the key. But when you actually remember, every snapdragon will have 2 genes for every trait. So if you have 2 C1s, the snapdragon will have red flowers. If you have 2 C2s, the snapdragon will have white flowers. But if you have the heterozygous condition, the snapdragon will have pink flowers. Like that. So suppose the parents, look right here at this, the parents right here, are a red snapdragon and a white snapdragon. So they're both homozygous. And so you see how the gametes, the only possible gamete, you may write both of them if you want and put it on a Punnett square, but when it's only one possible gamete, it might be simpler just to show it like this. Each parent can only possibly donate the C1 gamete or the C2 gamete, and all of the F1 will be pink. If you write this, both of them out, and put them both on each side of a Punnett square, you're going to get 4 squares, and all of them will have C1, C2 in there. They'll all be pink. Here's an example on the right-hand side, over here, where the parents were a red flower and a pink flower. And now I don't even have to tell you whether they're homozygous or heterozygous, because the parents, by virtue of their color, you can tell. So the red flowers have to have 2 C1s, the pink flowers have to have a C1 and a C2, and the overall flower, the offspring, you'll notice the offspring are going to be 50% red, these are all red, and 50% pink. 50% red, 50% pink. Incomplete dominance is on page 609 of your textbook. On page 610, there's codominance, which basically, as far as your work in genetics goes, you might as well think of it as the same as incomplete dominance. All the genetics looks exactly the same. There is a slight difference in the sense that it's not so much a blend as it is each gene expresses itself in different places in the body. So they're codominant genes. So these are shorthorn cattle, white or red. There's the bulls of the same cattle, white or red. But if you interbreed these, the gene is codominant, and you get a condition called roan. So instead of kind of a tan, lighter tan cow, what you get is the actual animals don't have a blended color, as that they have individual hairs that are either white or brown, white or red. So it's not, if you walked up to this cow right here, any one of these, and looked, you would find each hair is either white or brown. That's codominance as compared to incomplete dominance. But the genetics, the way you do Punnett squares and everything is exactly the same. This slide just shows what would happen if you, in a codominant situation in cattle, what would happen if you crossed 2 roan parents, and you'd still going to end up with a ratio of 1 to 2 to 1 in the offspring. 1 red to 2 whites, or 2 roans to 1 white. So this could be used on an exam, and in the numerical response, they might ask you the ratio of red to roan to white. And you should say the ratio is 1 to 2 to 1. And if you do that kind of a question, do the ratios in the smallest whole numbers. The second part of this lesson is multiple alleles. This is not that tricky. The only thing different about this is that the key looks bigger. In human blood type, here's the key on the left here. There's 3 different alleles. You can have the capital IA, and by the way, this is universally, we always use these I's for some reason, and it's on a tear-out sheet that you'll get with your exam that actually gives you that key. So I'll give that to you afterward. But this is how it works. So if you have, like for example, on the right-hand side here, this individual right here would have what blood type? Type A. What blood type would this be? Type A, because this is dominant over that. You see the small letter I? So that's type A. The only way to be a type O person is to have 2 small i's. What would happen if you got this one down here? You would be type AB. Now, just before I answer your question there, let me just say what that means. What this means, and this you learned in grade 11, if you're type A person, means you have the A antigen, it's just a protein, on your red blood cells. If you are type B, you've got the B antigen stuck on the membrane of your red blood cells. If you had the O blood type, you would have neither A or B antigens on your red blood cells. So I hope I said red blood cells every time because it's on your red blood cells where these antigens exist. So let me remind you that A and B are codominant, and they're both dominant over type O. So to get if you get A and B together, the A and B individual that we've circled at the bottom here would have type AB. However, when you're doing a Punnett square, you would just do it exactly the same as before. You would say, well, let's say a heterozygous type A person married a type O person. What would the Punnett square look like? And you notice that the genetics of this is still very simple. Each person will always only have 2 possible genes for that trait, but there are multiple possibilities, multiple different types of alleles that the person could have. So multiple alleles is not very complicated, and in terms of doing the genetics, it's just that the key is a little bit longer, and you can solve the problems exactly the same. Multiple alleles are dealt with on page 608. And if you notice here in fruit flies, in this table here, they have, you would think, just looking at these, that they'd all be codominant, but they really aren't. They show that this is a dominance hierarchy. In other words, E1 is dominant over all of the ones below it, E2, E3, E4, it's dominant over all of them. So if you have E1 and whatever else, it's going to have the wild color of eyes, the wild type phenotype. Whereas, so codominance, this is not codominance, this is actually a dominance hierarchy, so we can't even like use large letter, small letter, because they the higher the number is, the more dominant it is. So whatever the key tells you, you just work with that problem.